All right, so today we're going to be doing some stuff in Studio One specifically for beginners. We're going to touch on EDM and making beats and things like that. So let's just open up things here in Studio One. All right, so first things first, we're going to want to pull up a new track. But before then, we're going to want to make sure everything's set up properly. So when we get in there, we can just plug and play. Now, I'm not going to go into too many details on this as it gets pretty varied as far as what people have or, what people are working with, how big their setup is, how small it is. So I'm not going to go into too many details, but I'm going to cover some basics. Now, most people, when they're getting into audio recording, most likely have a audio interface. Mine is via USB, and I have the Focusrite. So presuming that you have the audio driver, the interface, and that it's all connected and hooked up and you've downloaded all the drivers, it should show up here, no problem. The other thing we want to take a look at is MIDI devices. So if you have a keyboard or maybe a beat pad or something like that, that's hooked up. Mine are already hooked up, obviously, but let's just say you don't have it hooked up yet. It can be either USB or you go from the back of the keyboard, for example, and go into the MIDI input of the audio interface. It'll show up either way. My keyboard, for example, I'm receiving from my USB MIDI, and I just typed in keyboard up here. Now for my beat pad, I just have it coming in through here. Again, anything USB, you probably have to download some drivers first. But once that's done, it should show up no problem. The other thing is, once you're in your locations, you're going to want to make sure all your VST plugins are uploaded here in your locations folder. This is where you tell your computer to find all those amazing VSTs, all those plugins, right? So your effects, your Serum, your Silent, your Massive, your native instrument stuff. You want to tell your computer where to look for those things. Maybe you got some Waves plugins. It's very important to have that all set up here as well. You're going to want to make sure you want to tell your computer where you want to save your songs. Usually there's a default setting here. And if you just simply default downloaded and installed PreSonus onto your C drive, your main drive on your computer, this is all going to be pre-set up. It's all going to be easy to find. But if you're someone like myself who has a pretty advanced setup, you're going to have multiple hard drives. You're going to have big hard drives that are holding a lot of sound sets. You're going to have other hard drives that are really fast, hard drives that do different sort of things. So in my case, I have all my projects set to my E hard drive, which is my NVMe M.2 hard drive, which uploads things very fast, as well as I have a fair bit of space on there as well. So that's just my personal preference, and that's where I have it going. So that's where you can choose to upload, save your songs. Once it's all done, now we can look at creating a new song. So over here, this is probably what most folks are going to see. These are kind of templates. They call them styles, but these are just templates for whatever kind of genre of music you're making. So today I'm just going to go with empty. And now once we open up Studio One, this is what we're going to see. And to start making music, there's a couple things that you can do to get started. It's pretty simple, actually. They have a really nice interface. The screen that I always automatically have pulled up that I totally recommend to any user of any DAW really, but particular Studio One, is if you hit F4 on your typing keyboard, that is going to pull up this left panel here, or you can hit the I button, it doesn't matter. But I always have this panel pulled up. Now, when you get started, the main panel you're going to want to get into is the browse panel in the bottom right. And we go up to the top here and we click on our instruments. And like I said, with the VSTs that we have told the computer to go find, they're all going to show up here in your instruments and in your effects. So now that we have them all uploaded and they're good to go, we simply take the instrument that we want. A very common one is Serum. We can simply drag and drop into the tracking panel over here. So at this point, if we want to get some MIDI going through, we just simply hit the arm button. We hit a couple keys and we're good to go. So if you're very confused where you're seeing MIDI come through, see in the bottom left when I hit keys, we see MIDI coming through with the little orange icon here. But you're not getting any sound out. You're not seeing any bars here. It's because you're not armed. So make sure that that's done. So now that we have the MIDI track, typically what I do when I'm starting to write a song is I don't bring in a synthesizer right away. The way that I personally write songs, there's a couple ways to do that, but I'll show you the way that I do it. Is I'm more of a melody guy. So I like to make sure all my melodies and my music is written. Not all of it exactly, but I make sure I kind of have the main structure, more or less, the main melody. And then I start to bring in drum beats and that sort of thing. Other producers actually prefer to start with the drums and bass and kind of build from there, which I don't discourage at all. I think that's also an extremely good way to write songs. It's just my ear and the way that my brain works. This is what works for me. So I've pulled up Kontakt here. And this is what houses a lot of their own instruments. So it's kind of a funky way, but the way I look at it is when you drag in Kontakt, it is technically an instrument, but it also houses multiple instruments within that instrument. So it's kind of a nice little package of instruments, more or less. And then so once you're in the Kontakt player, you simply choose which instrument you want through here. Again, you go through a similar process with making sure you tell Kontakt player where to find these instruments. Native Instruments has its own, tutorials and videos on how to find this. Again, I'm presuming that all this tedious work is done and that we're just focusing on getting started with EDM and making sure we know how to write and produce. Okay, so now that we have our piano loaded in, this is where the inspiration starts to go down and where the writing part becomes, for me, it's fun, but it's also work. So you got to start somewhere, right? So whether it's you heard a sample that you really like, or you actually just get on your keyboard, right? So for example, I'm not a very good player, but maybe you find some chords that you really like and that, you want to start to make a song. Let's use the chords I just made up a couple seconds ago. So now that I've got my notes, I'm going to start to correct everything and start to really draw it out. I've just dragged it so it's over the first bar, so we're in time. I'm just going to cue these up a little bit here so it's easier to work with. I'm going to right click these, set the length so they're all the same, and now I have kind of an even palette. I'm also going to set the velocity so they're all the same. Kind of future bass track, it's a genre I'm really familiar with, but something that I don't want to say is easy to make, but the concepts definitely involve different subgenres like hip hop or even kind of pulsy EDM stuff, or trap beats, or it really melodic stuff as well. So it's something that I really favor. Now that I have some chords that I like, so these are all very basic notes and just again something to build off of. But now that we have those, so these upper notes here are stuff that I chose earlier, just randomly. I mean, one way to get a consistent sound is to repeat notes like this. But just because out of curiosity, I'm going to just click on this, hit my D key, bring it over here for safekeeping later on. I'm going to go back in here and try and recreate something here with the bass notes that I've chosen. So those are my notes that I've chosen. And I'm going to do the Control C, Control V, Shift up thing here. Now I'm going to add in some thirds. So this one here, now the way it was explained to me of how to kind of get some nice chord structures and whatnot, is to keep as many notes kind of tightly knit together. You see the difference between this note, this one all the way up here, it's really far apart. So there's really heavy dynamics, which is not really a bad thing, but in this particular case with EDM, you know, if we want colorful, nice notes, we're going to want to kind of change things up a bit and do some other voicings. So let's just experiment. And the way it was explained to me to do a ninth chord in the drawing form of writing stuff where you're drawing these notes in and whatnot, doing this sort of thing. Take your natural, you know, major chord here, copy it, drag it up. And so your first note is now on the last note of the chord you made, and now you have a ninth chord, right? So let's just octave this down so we get better tonal qualities here. See how colorful that is? And also now we're a little closer here. And maybe shift down key this down here. It's a really jazzy chord. Not too sure how I feel about this one. Maybe take out the root note. Turn this into a second. There you go, kind of something there. Try a ninth chord here. Drag these two notes down. Just going through the same process here. And if there seems to be a consistent note like this one here, I'm just going to go right over and across. There we go. Now we have a 4-bar progression, and we can loop that now. Now that we have a decent chord progression, we're going to want to bring in like a kick and a snare and, you know, get a beat going. So now what I do personally for bringing in samples is I use a resource called Splice, which many producers are familiar with, but it's a monthly subscription-based product that, so here's the website here. It's a monthly subscription-based website where you know, multiple kind of other producers or artists or kind of vendors, they will actually create sample packs, and you can nicely go through and search what you want. So if you wanted a kick or something like that, or a vocal or a snare or a hi-hat, or you can search the genre, you can filter the BPM, the tempo, the key. It's absolutely unbelievable the amount of options you have for it. And it can be inspiration. You can just find a sample you like and write a song based around it. So, which I've done hundreds of times. So that's always really cool. And so once you have Splice, you sign up, you will you download this app. So once you download it, it syncs up to your app in your computer, and then you simply drag over the sample that you want to use. So in your own app, you can browse for the samples that you have and which one that you want within the ones that you have. So go to my all downloads, drums, kicks. Seems like a nice kick. I think we'll go with 10 there. It's a nice tight kick. And so we've got the sample here. And we're just going to duplicate it 4 times, of course, so that we have 4 times. So it's very loud. Let's turn that down. So that's obviously a basic, you know, 4 on the floor, steady kick. Normal EDM stuff is at 128 BPM. If we want to get dead mousy, we can lower the filter over here. So we had it about up here. We're going to lower it down. I mean, that's with really minimal effects. You know, we'll do other tutorials on that sort of thing later on, but if we want to get super dead mousy, we can add some delay, some reverb, maybe we'll leave the distortion out of it, but that should get us somewhere. Gonna give it a low cut on the EQ. it's a real simple kind of setup there. Again, this is all for beginners. Now, how we can get even something as simple as this to sound much, much better, much clearer, and easier to EQ later on is by adding a sidechain. So this is really important. The way that I add sidechain, there's a couple ways to do it in Studio One. The one that I find most effective for EDM and most kind of particular to EDM and Studio One is we're going to go into our mix panel down in the right corner. We're going to add effects channel, and we're going to go back to browse. And I use a kind of a volume shaping tool. So we have Lfo Tool by X4 Records, or we have Cable Guys Shaper Box, and then you have Volume Shaper within that. But let's use Lfo Tool today for the sake of easiness. So what we want to do is double click. We're going to drag this one all the way to the top, this one all the way down, almost touching the bottom corner, but not quite. This can stay sort of here, and we're going to drag it so it's in the shape of this, more or less. Doesn't have to be perfect. Now that we have that set up here, we go into the channel that we want it to be sidechained to. So we want, essentially we want this track here, we want our pulsing synth to be kind of having that, like I said, pulsing effect where it sounds like it's going around the kick, and it's got that pulsing effect, which makes you kind of really get into the music and make you feel the beat. So now that we're there, we go into our effects channel that we just added, which is called FX1. And oh, let me just back up a second here. So now that we have the Lfo Tool shape kind of built here, we're going to go into our instruments, and you have this in Studio One Artist and in Professional. You go to your note effects input filter. You're just going to simply drag this over, and it acts like an instrument is what it does. So what we do is, now that it's in, we're going to click on this section here and link it to our Lfo Tool. We're going to double click the track section, and we're going to draw in the trigger for it. So it doesn't have to be anything complicated. We simply just add in a 16th note almost anywhere. Doesn't matter if it's here, up here, or wherever. It doesn't make any noise. This is just a trigger for the sidechain. So to activate the trigger, we go back into Lfo Tool, and when we go to Note Trig, we click it until we see the N, so ENV, which stands for envelope. So this now is in envelope mode, which means every time that this clicks once, this activates once. Because if it's in this mode, loop mode, once it triggers this once, it will just simply loop this forever and will never stop until the song is over. But now that it's in envelope, we can make sure it triggers each and every time we want it to. The way we choose is by drawing in this section. So whenever this piece of MIDI gets drawn in, so whether it's here, or wherever, that's when it activates, right? So we want it to be every time the kick goes on. So it's not active yet. So the way we activate it on this track here specifically is we go into our panel here, or into the mixer panel, which is here, and we click it to effects 1 here, or in our eye panel, we can do the same thing here as well. So we can hear the difference there. Once I go back to main, Now with it on, I'm starting to get annoyed by the attack on this kick. So there we have it. Now, I mean, just to spice things up, we can add a snare. I'm not picking these very carefully. I'm just kind of doing this for example's sake. So there we have that. Now in EDM, there's typically some kind of lead, and go to some presets. Serum has some half decent lead presets, but I'm going to go to what I have here. And create a little ARP here. Okay, so we've got kind of that style of EDM. Now let's change some things up and kind of turn this into a different EDM style. When I started the video, I was kind of thinking future bass, so let's tackle that. And then after that, I can easily turn that into like an 80s theme thing. So just out of argument's sake, let's see what I can do. Now, first of all, with future bass, we're gonna probably want to go closer to 160. Kind of mute some things here. Change up the beat. Now we want the side chain to match the kick and the snare. And these samples are not going to work, so we can go into our splice and go into drums, kicks, and then over here on the right side we can maybe click future bass. This one is pretty hardcore. And we're just gonna drag it over, but we're gonna hold the Alt key and drag it on here, and now that sample is replaced. And now we're gonna get a snare. This one should do. Again, hold Alt, drop it on. So usually in future bass, you want the kind of sound to be pretty, not high passed, but definitely want to increase the high end. So we're going to bring our filter up here. So we're just going to change this lead sound up a bit. Maybe go with something more plucky. It's kind of cool, actually. And then just take the bass. So we can drag that down. Just automatically makes a new MIDI track. We will go Serum. Call this bass. I always make my bass yellow, so I'm going to do that. And I'm going to click on this. I'm going to take all the high notes out that I don't want, because we just want the bass to be in mono. And the way we can make a half decent bass, turn on the sub, go to the saw wave, and maybe, you know what, we'll turn one oscillator on, make it a pretty detuned track, you know, pretty wide. Turn on the filter. Or actually, no, let's get used to the EQ. We'll go to the EQ, turn on the high pass filter, and we'll get it down pretty low. Turn down the Q on that. And let's see how this sounds. Yeah, so that's pretty high pitched, right? So we want to turn this down an octave and this down an octave. Put a compressor on there. bass. We'll turn this on to FX1, and we'll see how it sounds with just the bell sound in the bass. So because we've got our chords written here, we can go into Studio One, we can go in instrument parts, and we can actually hit detect key signature, and it shows up we're coming in C major. So let's say, for example, when I'm writing something, I'm not too fancy about the chord parts anymore, even though I've changed it twice or three times. I'm actually more fancy about the bass line and this bell sound with the drum. What I can do is go into Splice, and maybe I want like a vocal chop or something. So we go into vocals, C major, let's see what we got.
Where do we go?
Actually, we can just do A minor. Probably more is going to show up with that because it's the same scale. C major and A minor are the same.
3 a.m. Yeah, I'll be there for up on giving up.
We can use that. That sounds all right. See if we can make some vocal chops. We're going to take the sample, bring it in. We're going to right click it, go down to audio, and go to send to new impact. So it automatically created a new track here. We're going to call it vocal chops. And I guess we'll go to main effects. Now this part's up to everybody. Now I have a lot of vocal chains set up, so you can actually go into this little triangle here and select a vocal chain that you've already made. Or the way you create one is you simply browse over to your effects and start dragging in effects that you want to use, and just simply once you have all the effects that you like, you just hit store effects chain, save it, you're good to go. For me, I have one already set up. So I clicked on Vox setup and I just simply bring up all my Tingsmon. So now that we've got that, so you're probably wondering, okay, how the heck do I make any vocal chops? There's a couple ways. First of all, when you bring up the vocal chops, the impact shows up. So you can toy with each thing. And now, if you're like me and you have a beat pad, you can also use it there, or you can use your keyboard. And you can mess with each individual chop, more or less. You can zoom in on it, you can lengthen it, shorten it, whatever. You can make it a one shot, you can loop it, normal, whatever. You can actually change the pitch, the filter. I don't mess with this stuff too much, actually. I try and keep it all in tune, right? That's why I chose this particular vocal chop, this vocal track, so that when I bring it into new impact, it's all in key already, right? So what I do from here is now it's playtime, right? So you can either go in here and start to draw in things. Turn this down to like 150. And we're going to pulse these bass notes. So we're going to select them all, length to 1/8 to match the 1/8 in the synthesizer. And I guess real quick, I'll try and make a drop. Just because. Now, when you're making a drop, a lot of synth layers is the key. So we're going to add 1, 2. Usually I add 3 layers. We're going to go start with Serum anyway. I've already, saved my presets. So I got my top stack, which is just 16, 16, basic saw wave, nothing crazy. Then I usually just go in here, add the multiband on it. Really basic. Filter, high cut, MG12 just on the A oscillator. And then we've got this layer here, which is synth layer. I'll low cut all these later with an EQ, but other than that, that's a good start. Get them all into FX1, turn down the levels. So there you go. It's a really quick drop that try and do a quick build up here. When you do a build up, usually you get some claps. Actually, use this just for argument's sake. Set the BPM to 126 because that's what the file is. It says here, Koyu build up 05 to 126 is usually the BPM. So you must set that so it matches up to our tune. Sidechain and our kick. Oh shit. Sorry, I'm not talking too much. All right, so I've got the basics of a build here. All right, so we're gonna go, the build starts here. And we're gonna want to increase this filter. So we just click on that, go to automate, and increase the intensity all the way up until here. We're gonna leave a 1 bar gap in between there and the drop. I don't like that little freaking ticky ticky ticky. So I'm going to take this sample and adjust it a little bit. And just repeat that first part. And get the bass going. Again, cut off that last part there. Oops. Get this. Cut off that last part. And with the vocal chops as well, we're going to automate the filter so it kind of increases intensity. Little thingy here with the vocal chops as well. So that before the drop, it comes through. Copy these here. Drag these up so that it's intense for the drop. And we got the snare, we got the kick, we got that. Boom. Got the thing. We want some bass for the drop. And we want a whoosh and some crash. So a reverse cymbal. Kind of cool. If you want to drag something out so it fits nicely at this side, you hold Alt, click, and drag it to where you need to be. For the drop, I'm going to use a different bass. Really a big distorted bass is preferable. Yeah, that'll do, donkey. Like I was trying to make a lead earlier, but I failed. So I will try and make a kind of a new one because this is more of an ARP. It's more of like a background-y thing. This one's always like speaks to me, man. This preset. Yeah, something like that, you know. I think I just did like a Just gonna turn this down so it's not as annoying, sorry. All right, so let's see how that is. We're going to cut out the lead for the little break. Sometimes what guys do is they'll actually like cut out the first couple notes of the like they'll cut out the bass. Just out of curiosity, I'm going to try a couple things real quick. Hate it. Hate it. And what we can do is we can chill it out after the drop, put in some piano. So I just drag down that MIDI down to my contact here, which is my piano still, right here. And we'll see how this sounds. So those are really hard notes. We can turn down the velocity here. I don't necessarily, I kind of like to go lower on the velocity, but in contact, I'll turn it down to soft as well. And, you know, just so that after the drop, and those are a little fast chord changes for piano, and they're really stiff and rigid. You know, you could edit it, maybe take out this one and take out this one. Maybe, maybe not, we'll see. But actually, I'm just gonna try with the lead on top. So sometimes what's cool too is you can actually drag two MIDI parts together. So you can have the piano part here, take part of the lead and drag it right on top of that. And select, oh boy. So I'm just gonna octave this up. And then drag it up. So now it's separated nicely. Set all velocity to 50. And we can take all this. You see how it's like super bright, like it's not together. We just drag over, click G again, it connects everything together. G on the typing keyboard. All right, actually turned out to be a pretty cool track. I mean, just kind of farting around, shooting up some ideas here, and I forget where my original chords went. I could have swore I duplicated some and shot them. I think I may have accidentally deleted them at some point, which is kind of brutal. But anyway, this is the future bass kind of thing. And there we go. So hopefully I'm not the best at, you know, explaining every little tiny detail. I'm really sorry if things are really vague or unclear, but I try and I do my best. And I'm still getting used to doing these videos and that sort of thing. But I think a lot of people can appreciate that you can get a result like this out of Studio One. So I think the main factor for me that I just want to touch on before I go is that I was struggling with the drop chords and I felt like it didn't have enough power, like enough oomph. So if I mute this one and the bottom one, it's still okay. And I think I had the original bass on there as well, which is kind of okay. But as soon as I added this punchy bass this bottom layer, which is just one saw wave with 16 voices, and I kept this top layer. And so the 4 of these combined with this 5th bass layer, that is what really made it explode like this. Don't get me wrong, the lead also really helps with that as well. And having these ARPs, it's kind of, to do it justice, it really takes everything to make it what it is and have that explosive sound. By the way, I didn't put any hi-hats on this or anything. So if you're kind of daunted by drums, it is extremely important to have good drums. Don't get me wrong. However, just to get a basis of a song and get the structure down and that sort of thing, you know, this is good enough. Just kick and snare just to get you going with some sidechain and so on and so forth. The only thing I would correct here is in the drop here, or sorry, not the drop, but the build up. The volumes get really loud, and then the kick also gets really boomy and cuts out a lot of frequency. So if I just cut this back, that should help out a lot. Also, what really makes this explode is having this little break between the build up and the drop. I mean, I have these like ambient builds here, and then this vocal chop kind of build up. That really helps a lot, but it's those are some key components to really give yourself some good old-fashioned EDM Studio One. So I think I'm going to end it off on that note. You know, I think this turned out really well, just for having no idea where I was going to go with anything. I really just wung it tonight, and you know, I started with a bit of coffee. Thank goodness. I think I attribute 90% of this to that. But, you know, I just did my thing, and by no means am I bragging, but I just simply wanted to show folks that if you follow some certain steps, you have half an idea of what you're doing musically. I encourage musicality over anything. So I encourage, before you learn the technicalities of going through your DAW and drawing MIDI and stuff like that, I really encourage you to exercise your brain, do a lot of music theory. I know very, very minimal, but I know enough to get me by, in the sense of, once I know what key I'm in, I know kind of what scales to fart around with. But also at the same time, just training your ear, knowing what notes sound good, like knowing if you can put a third in there or a second or anything like that. It's extremely important, extremely helpful. And it's going to give you a product like this. Like, for example, part of why this sounds so explosive is that I'm using really big, open, broad, colorful chords. You know, that's why we took so much time at the start to draw it out, fart with it, change it, morph it, and choose our stuff. Sometimes even delete it. That's how it all comes together. So yeah, again, you know, I'm just going to leave it there. I'm really happy with how it turned out. And hopefully some of you beginners out there understood most of what I was talking about. I tried to be as clear and as slow as possible, but the writer and producer in me sort of comes out, and once I kind of catch on to something, or I hear it coming together, that's when I sort of lose you, I'm sure. So I apologize if that was the case. Anyway, I'm going to leave it at that, as I said, and we'll pick up on this maybe in the near future. I want to put this out, see what kind of comments come back, and see what folks want, see what I was missing in this, maybe make some corrections, as well as just build on it, right? Maybe we'll do a tutorial. Maybe we'll use this as a track of, like a storyline where we work on EQs and we work on compression and we work on finishing songs. That's also a really important thing. So that sort of thing. I'm going to leave it at that, and make sure you subscribe. Check out my SoundCloud. I'll post a link to that as well. Check out, I'm going to have a website coming out as well, where I'm going to be building sample packs and, presets and everything for folks as well. Trying to keep it at a nice cheap rate, maybe free. We'll see. We'll see how things go. Make sure you subscribe. Make sure you click the notification bell, so whenever I put something out, you get notified. But also make sure you hit that like button. Any support really helps. I just want to say a huge thank you to every single one of my supporters that I have right now. You have no idea how much that means to me. So again, thank you so much. And that'll be it for now.